Fitzpatrick takes the snap, drops back, lobs it back right corner. Decker! He's got it! Touchdown! Eric Decker scores! And the Jets have won it in overtime!
This is the Jet Take with Ben Blessington and Kyle Fahey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a partial installment of the Jet Take. I will be your host for today, Kyle Fahey. And not as usual, we have a special show for you guys today. You know, special edition. We got a trade to talk about. We got some cuts to talk about. I am not joined by the esteemed Ben Blessington. I am joined by the great D.A. Osorio from Turn on the Jets and Scott from Play Like a Jet podcast, all of us members of the TOJ brand. Guys, what's going on?
Happy Saturday. Glad to be part of the Turn On. We're going to call it what we need to call it, Kyle. It is the Turn On the Draft, Play Like a Jet Take edition of TOJ Digital. What's going on, fellas? Happy Saturday.
It is a rainy Saturday, and I've got a 6-hour drive ahead of me, so I'm really excited to talk some Jets because it'll take my mind off this annoying traffic that, Dalton, you know all too much about living in the same area that I do.
Very much so.
Hey, it's hot, it's humid, and it's sweaty in Florida. Nothing changes. It could be in the middle of January and expect like 89 and 80% humidity. It never changes here. Let's get into the topics. Obviously, the main topic for today, the reason we're even doing this show, the Jets. Mike Maccagnan, Big Daddy Mike, he pulled off the trade of arguably the Jets century. We got a second-round pick for Sheldon Richardson, and we got Jermaine Kearse, a guy who can come in and be a producer for us almost immediately. D.A., we'll start with you. What's your immediate reaction on this, and do you think, Maccagnan did the best he could with this trade?
Yeah, so, for starters, I think this is the best he could have done. I think that a lot of Jet fans were starting to bring Maccagnan's feet to the fire, so to speak, right? And I think that just speaks to the nature of how bipolar this fan base is as a whole, that this is a guy who they were building statues for just a year ago, and now it's turning into, oh, no, well, he has to go and Bowles has to go, et cetera. Granted, this doesn't take any of them off the hook for a lot of the dumb decisions that they've made, but this is by far his best move, I feel. And here's why. Not only do you get a second-round pick from the Seahawks, and again, you're probably going to be picking in the top half of the second round. You now get a pick at the bottom half of the second round, which could be parlayed into other picks that allow you to rebuild the middle class of this roster. The other component that isn't talked about enough, and I feel like a lot of people are scoffing at it, is that you add a player in Kearse who is a year removed from a 5-touchdown, 14 yards a catch season, who has proven that he can be productive in this league. The Jets wide receiver core is an intriguing group, but they didn't have any veterans after Quincy Enunwa gets hurt. You bring in Kearse, who slots right in if Robbie Anderson has to be suspended. If he doesn't, he slots right in as your number 2. Lets you bring in Hanson and Stewart slowly. Lets you bring them slowly because, again, we've seen with young receivers, if you play them too much too soon, they develop bad habits that are hard to break. And now you also get to swap 7th-round picks with them. So in theory, you turned what people were saying was only going to be a 4th or 5th-round comp pick if you did not spend enough during free agency into a 2nd-round pick, a 7th-round pick, and an under 28-year-old wide receiver that can produce on this team. So I think it's a home run for Maccagnan, and honestly, he deserves a lot of kudos for it.
Absolutely. Scott, your Jet take on this.
Yeah, I think what Dalton said is largely true. I think Dalton and I had talked about this. I thought that the best that Maccagnan was going to be able to do was hope that Richardson played well, like it looked like he was doing in training camp, make it to the trade deadline, and hope that some contending team would want to get in on Sheldon at the trade deadline and hope that they would give up the 2nd-round pick that he should have taken for him last year and didn't. But instead, he ends up getting the 2nd-rounder now, which I was surprised about. Again, it's a late 2nd-rounder, but still, it's a premium pick in a draft where they're desperately going to need premium picks. And Jermaine Kearse, look, he's not the meat of the deal, and I talked to Joe Blewett about this. He's not the meat of the deal, but he's a nice add-in, and on this sorry roster, let's be honest, he's probably going to be the number 2 receiver. He's an experienced guy, like you said, Dalton. He's got Super Bowl experience, and he's, by all accounts, a high-character guy, too, which is nice. So you throw all these things together, and what you really find is that the Jets did about as well as you could have possibly imagined for Sheldon. and I have some hot fire to breathe a little bit later on this. I talked to you about this, Kyle, about a certain member of the Jets media that I have something to say about, who had some words about this trade that not only do I not agree with, but I don't really agree with this guy at all on anything, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But I think it was a great trade. I think there's no way around it. And look, let's be real. Any pick that they get right now is leverage for a trade up for a quarterback if they need to trade up for a quarterback, or it's a way to, like Dalton said, rebuild the middle class of the roster. Either way, this is a team that was in need of draft picks and not really in need of somebody like Richardson, who is a very good player, but he struggled both on and off the field the last 2 years despite the training camp heroics this year and doing well in the preseason and all that. They didn't really need him because he's at a position of strength and he's going to leave at the end of the year anyway. And as Connor Rogers, who's a TOJ alum and now over at Bleacher Report, has pointed out, odds are the Jets are going to spend so much that the Jets won't get that compensation third-round pick anyway that we've all been pointing to. So all in all, look, I've been critical of Maccagnan in a lot of ways on different things, specifically, obviously, the draft pick of Christian Hackenberg in the second round in 2016, but you couldn't hope for more here. This is a home run deal as far as I'm concerned, and Maccagnan should get a well-deserved pat on the back for this one.
Absolutely, guys. I can't agree with you more, and I want to go into the salary part of this. And a lot of people, I saw a lot of Seahawks fans saying, this guy's overpaid. According to SportsRack.com, pretty reliable contract place. For this year, the cap hit is scheduled to be $2.2 million. I don't know about you guys, but I'll take a number 2 wide receiver, either low end or high end, for $2.2 million. I think that's a steal for us any day of the week. And then after this year, there's a potential out for either the team or player. I don't know which one, but knowing where we are right now, it's a possibility he opts out next year. And if it's the Jets' options, I'm sure we'll opt out next year. And there's zero dead cap with that potential out. So it's basically like a 1-year loan, but there might be a scenario where he stays. It's unlikely. But for right now, this is like a 1-year loan that was kind of, as Scott said, it was a side piece, to the meal. We got our big chicken breast with the second-round pick, and now we got a side of potato wedges with Jermaine Kearse. They go quickly, but it's worth it. And we got rid of a guy who has been known to have locker room problems, off-the-field problems, looking for a huge payday. Ultimately might have been one of the highest-paid defensive ends in football, definitely top 5. And just a guy you don't want in the culture anymore. He's a great player. He was Defensive Rookie of the Year, but that's in the past, and he hasn't produced like he has, in the past recently. And it's not about what did you do for the past. It's about what you're doing now. And especially this year where we're going to be struggling, everybody expects that he's going to play, but you never know with him. It's always a big question mark with him. So I think taking a second-round pick any day of the week from any team for a guy who is either going to walk away or you're going to overpay is a win.
Yeah, no question. Absolutely. Oh, and let me just throw this in real quick, guys, and then you guys can chomp on this a little bit. If you remember a couple of years ago, Belichick got a second-round pick for Chandler Jones, who is a perennial double-digit sack guy and was going to make a ton of money. The Jets got a better deal for Sheldon, who struggled the last 2 years and has all kinds of off-the-field baggage, than Belichick got for Chandler Jones, who I would think had a lot more value at the time. So that's something to think about, too.
Well, and honestly, now you say that, remember, they got Chandler, they got a second-round pick, and they got Jonathan Cooper, the offensive guard from the Cardinals, right? But this is kind of a similar deal. The difference is, you're right, the pick and the ability to swap sevens, and the fact that they got a player who was more productive at his point than Cooper was when the Cardinals unloaded him. You're right. I mean, kudos to Maccagnan for being able to outdo Belichick on that. I mean, obviously we're having this conversation as we find out that Belichick turned a quarterback that he was probably going to cut into Philip Dorsett. But honestly, this isn't about celebrating Belichick. I think what it does come down to, though, is that Maccagnan too often in negotiations has ended up with some egg on his face, and some rightfully, some wrongfully, right? Because you can obviously make arguments that he shouldn't have paid certain guys, or maybe he shouldn't have traded draft picks. But obviously the Brandon Marshall deal was a good move. I hate Ryan Fitzpatrick, but you really weren't going to walk away from bringing him back after the season he had. It was tough to do. But this is absolutely a win for him. And now it's, do you trust him enough with this second-round pick to go and make the choice that in next year's draft? Because this is a team that still is going to need a quarterback, probably needs a left tackle, probably needs a shutdown cornerback if Morris Claiborne's really banged up and the young guys don't take that next step. So is he the guy that you trust going forward to make those picks? But the Jets are in a better position right now because now you have not only that extra second, but that extra fifth that you got from Dallas. So now you have more ammunition to go do what you need to do in next year's draft.
Absolutely. And, Scott, that was a parallel I was hoping the Jets would get. You bringing up the Chandler Jones trade to Arizona. I'll have to go and find the tweet, but I do distinctly remember tweeting that the Jets need to look for a deal like this. As I said a couple times before, anytime you can get a second-round pick for a player that you were probably going to get rid of, that's a win every day of the week, even considering the contract we're going to pay him, just the extent of that. It's just a huge win for the Jets. And, I saw a couple articles out there before the trade was even official, before the trade was even being talked about. There have been rumors for a couple weeks. I saw just a couple jokes out there. They're saying, Mike Maccagnan's going to get thrown to the washer, by Seattle GM. I'm forgetting his name right now, spacing on it.
John Schneider.
John Schneider, there it is. I'm pretty sure Maccagnan took him to the washer. Like, that money is clean. It's ready to go. The Jets won this trade pretty easily.
Yeah, although I will say, I think Sheldon is going to have an impact on that Seattle defense. And really, if you think about it, what better place for him to go than a place where, A, the locker room is steady, and B, there are other playmakers around to elevate him. So now he'll get opportunities there that he might not have gotten with the Jets as far as, okay, if you try to double-team Sheldon, then there's 4, 5, 6 other guys that can really make a difference. Not really the case on the Jets. You know who the playmakers are in the Jets defense, and they're all on the defensive line. It was Sheldon, it was Leonard Williams, and it was Mo, if he rebounds from this injury. So it's a great situation for Sheldon. You could say that Seattle maybe overpaid and the Jets won, but look, if Sheldon gets back to what he was 2 years ago and he at least looked like he was headed in that direction through camp in the preseason, then this really helps Seattle a lot because they're a team that can contend for a Super Bowl this season. So really, I think it's kind of a win-win. I think we look at it as the Jets won the trade because we look at it as, okay, is Sheldon really worth a second-round pick to the Jets? Now, obviously, he's got a different value to the Seahawks. So if he helps them as an impact player and can, get back to the form that he showed in his rookie year and his sophomore year, then it's a win-win, really. So we'll see where this goes. But I kind of like the idea of Seattle getting aggressive and adding somebody like Sheldon Richardson because I think he is a guy that, if motivated and in the right frame of mind and if he stays out of trouble, can make a difference on a Super Bowl caliber team.
Well, now the issue becomes if you don't block him, it's Bobby Wagner and Cam Chancellor coming after you instead of Calvin Pryor and Darren Lee, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, kudos to Seattle though, because this is not the first time that they've aggressively gone after a Pro Bowl type talent. They've traded Max Unger for Jimmy Graham, right? And everybody was like, "What? You traded your starting center to go?" But Seattle has proven time and time again that they will go out and get players that they really covet. And you're right. Scott, I think you nailed it, right? Like, we can sit here and debate who wins, and ultimately we won't know who won this trade realistically until we see who's taken with this pick or what it turns into eventually. But for Sheldon Richardson, in and of itself, you couldn't have picked a better situation for him to go to because now he goes and plays with Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill and Frank Clark, Bobby Wagner with Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman behind him. It's a scary, scary defense, and it's a Super Bowl caliber because now, here's the thing, because now if Sheldon had come out with the Jets and had 8 sacks, it's 8 sacks in front of 5,000 folks and 12 TOJ bloggers because it's all of us that essentially are covering the team right now, right? Whereas you go to Seattle and you do this on a team that's in the playoffs and say you're the guy that sacks Aaron Rodgers in the divisional game and you're the guy that blasts Eli Manning in the conference title, now you're going to cash in. Now somebody's going to write you a check. And so I think it's a really, really great situation for him. It sucks to see him go realistically because I think he was a warrior. I think, yes, Scott, you alluded to some of the locker room issues, so there was that. But I think that when he was on, he was one of the better players on the team, and it is sad to see him go. But it is good that we got some value for him for sure.
You know what else Sheldon's going to really love about Seattle, Washington?
What? Legalized weed?
Yes. Yep. You just got to get the timing down. I don't know if he's like okay with that. He's got to get the timing down, and he can have as much fun as he wants. All right,
that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that was probably one of the first things that crossed into his mind, knowing Sheldon. Let's talk a little bit about the cuts. We're currently recording this on a Saturday afternoon. It's us, the boys. Saturday afternoon, we got to get the roster down to 53. I believe we had 90-ish. There are a lot of guys getting cut across the team. A lot of trades going on in the NFL. Let's talk a little bit about the Jets cuts. We'll just talk about some surprising ones, maybe unsurprising ones. And we're recording this at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, so there is about an hour and a half left for cuts. So fair warning, not everybody's gone, but there have been some surprising cuts. And we'll start with the ones that, I think we woke up to this morning, around 11 a.m. That's when I woke up at least. Jets have released nose tackle Deion Simon and defensive end Lawrence Thomas. Scott, we'll start with you on this one. Your initial thoughts, and do you see a reason why?
Yeah, the Deion Simon one was very surprising to me. I didn't see that one coming at all. He's a guy that, by all accounts, Maccagnan had pegged to be the next Snacks Harrison. We'd heard Charlie Casserly talk about that on NFL Network, and whenever you hear Charlie Casserly talk, you might as well be talking to Mike Maccagnan because Casserly is Maccagnan's mentor. And I thought that Simon was supposedly making progress. I'd been at practice once or twice, and you heard reports from there that people were thinking he might be one of the breakout guys, but I guess it just didn't happen, and he'll hopefully go on and have some success elsewhere. I wish him the best. He seems like a good dude from the profiles and stuff that you've read about him and what you know about his story. But, yeah, that one surprised me. Lawrence Thomas was a little bit surprising, but whatever. The other one was Beltre. That was a little bit surprising, but I don't think it's anything too shocking other than Simon so far. And I think, obviously, the Jets, as a team that is very talent-starved, like we talked about, as these cuts come down throughout the league, they're going to be scouring the waiver wire looking for a piece. There may be a guy that maybe Maccagnan wanted in a late round in the draft and couldn't get, and maybe that guy shakes loose so he can grab somebody there, or an undrafted free agent who did well in the preseason, but there's no spot for him on some roster, so he shakes loose, or even a veteran offensive lineman that'll keep Josh McCown from getting murdered in Week 1 against the Buffalo Bills, something like that. It's going to be interesting to watch. I don't really know what else to expect from the Jets in terms of shocking cuts. The only thing that I could think of that would be mildly surprising would be if a veteran like Steve McClendon was released. But other than that, nothing would really shock me. This isn't a very good roster, so there aren't a lot of guys that you'd be crying into your soup about if they were to get released. So I guess this is kind of one of those trips to the Goodwill store for Mike Maccagnan where he's going to go and just look for bargains and see what's out there. And if he has to drop a guy or two like Beltre or Thomas to get somebody that he thinks is slightly more promising, I think that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to talk a little bit about the Tanner Purdom. We released him. I think we expected this. We traded for, what's his last name? Hennessy? His last name Hennessy?
Yeah, and the three of us talked about this on the Jet Take. You, me, and Ben were talking about this on the Jet Take as well earlier in the week.
Yeah, I didn't see him do anything really wrong. I did not see him do anything wrong throughout the preseason. You said you saw a couple things out of, training camp, a couple articles that said he missed a couple snaps, but I hadn't seen that. I don't understand trading away a depth safety for a long snapper when we had a solid one, a guy who's been here for 7 or 8 years, I think going on his 8th. He's never had a botched snap in a regular season. I don't think he's ever missed a game. I mean, this is just the ideal stability you want from a player. And on the special teams core, that has not been good, over the past couple of years. And I don't think that's due to Tanner Purdom, but that was just one guy that I thought, was a lock for this roster. So I'm kind of surprised. I wish him the best in his future, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and Dalvin, because, like I said, we talked on the Jet. Story's going forward with this is that apparently he was really close with Ross Martin, the kicker, who the Jets from at Hennessy. It was at his wedding storyline, and I thought that was part of the reason they brought him in. And then they cut Martin anyway, so I don't really understand what the rationale for trading for this guy was. Like you said, I maybe heard him miss the snap or something in training camp, but he'd been a very steady hand for quite a while. I don't know why you trade for a long snapper in the first place, especially when you have a respectable one. Dalvin, what do you think, man? The whole thing kind of seems like a bizarre turn of events.
Actually, Dalvin, he went into his garage. He was driving home, so his call dropped. He'll be back on in a second.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
well,
he just
then, Kyle, let's pretend you're Dalvin.
Okay.
And,
I don't know if I can pull off his voice. It's kind of got that like Caribbean accent to it. I don't think I can pull it off. But if I was Dalvin, I'd probably say something along the lines of, "Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. I think you hit it on the nail there. I don't understand it, seeing as, Ross Martin was cut. This is a guy who everybody, put together. We brought him on because of Ross Martin, the connection there. I think everybody was their little, Scooby-Doo super sleuther there for a minute, and it just, it didn't turn out that way. But I do think Chandler Catanzaro won the job, and Ross Martin did not, primarily because I saw Chandler Catanzaro get more attempts and make more than Ross Martin. So, kind of confusing by the Jets why you would just get rid of a safety for a long snapper, but I guess we'll see what it works out. Or it could all be a part of Mike Maccagnan's elaborate plan to tank. So you never know.
Hey, listen, I am all for the tank. I think the funny thing is, and you and I and Ben talked about this on Wednesday, the whole players versus management versus coaches when it comes to the tank stuff, because Maccagnan may be thinking, let's tank. I know I'm going to be here next year, and I want the best draft picks possible so that I can rebuild this roster. But if you're Todd Bowles, you're thinking, well, I better win some games or I'm getting fired. And if you're the players, you may be thinking, I better play really well and help this team win games or I'm getting cut. So it's a weird dynamic that we may see this year come into play. As a fan, look, I was clear about this on Wednesday. I've been clear about it on Twitter, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. I think that the best interest of the team long-term is to tank. That doesn't mean I like rooting against them, but what it does mean is that I think for the long-term interest of the team, them losing a lot of games and getting good draft picks in an obvious lost year, because let's be real, even if everything goes their way, they're not making the playoffs with this roster. They're just not. I think the best case scenario is what happened in 2004. When was it 2013 or 2014? Now I'm losing track. When Geno Smith's rookie year, it was 2013, right? Geno Smith's rookie year. Okay, yeah, these years all blur together for me now. But yeah, Geno Smith's rookie year when they went 8-8, and it really hosed them draft position wise, and it tricked people into thinking they were better than they were. And a lot of people have talked about this. Edward Gorelick, who does a lot of the analytics stuff for TurnOnTheJets.com, there was a huge disparity in terms of the Jet victories and the Jet losses as far as points. So the Jets would barely win some games, but in the games they lost that year, they got blown out. So it kind of tricked people into thinking they were better than they were. And what did that really do for the Jets in the long run? Nothing. It kind of screwed them, and then we saw what happened after that. So better off to just bottom out, get the picks, rebuild, and so on and so forth. So I think that might be what you're saying. Maybe some of these moves that you're scratching your head going, what's going on? Why would you trade for a long snapper? Or why would you do this? Or why would you do that? It weakens the team. Maybe it is some sort of diabolical, let's do worse this year so we could do better in the long run plan, right?
Before we hop into the next topics and the cuts, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsors of the Jet Take. First, if you want to get tickets throughout the year, you can go check out our friends Seat Giant. Use the promo code JETTAKE, the Jet Take. All caps, all lowercase, doesn't matter how you do it, just the Jet Take. Get all your season tickets at an affordable rate We're giving you a discount. It helps the show. It helps you. Think about it as a beer on us. Boom. You get to the stadium. The money you saved using the promo code, the Jet Take, you're helping your favorite podcast. You're helping yourself. Why not do it? And the Seat Giant website, honestly, I'm a big user of it. They have a great interface. 360 view of the seats you will be sitting in. No risky business. All verified tickets at a great affordable rate. Help us. Help yourself. Go check them out. seatgiant.com. Also, we have a promo going on with the New York Jets, the guys without a Super Bowl since '69. You can go get tickets for the home opener against the Dolphins, the home game against the Atlanta Falcons, who are coming off a Super Bowl appearance. They lost, though. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars. That should be a win, hopefully. You can go get tickets to that. Link is in our bio. Use promo code TheJetTake. It helps you. You get a discount, and it helps us. It helps the show. We get recognition, and we might even see you guys out there at a couple games if you buy enough. So go ahead, help your guys, help us out, help yourselves out. It's worth it for everybody in the long run, and you get to sit through and enjoy some Jets football no matter how bad it is. Remember, there's beer to numb all the pain. So make sure you go check out Seat Giant and the New York Jets promo we have going on. Link in our bio. All right, so we're going to go on to our topics for today. In this episode, this special episode, I'm joined by the D.A. Osorio and Scott from Play Like a Jet. D.A. repping draft season, Turn on the Jets podcast, and at Scott, as I said, the Play Like the Jet podcast. Boys, what's going on?
Happy Sunday, man. It's great to be back for part 2 of this crossover episode from Turn on the Jets Digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were you calling it, Dalvin? Play Like a Jet Take, draft season, turn on or something?
Yeah.
Turn on the draft and play like a Jet Take.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually, the draft and playing like a Jet don't turn out pretty good with these last couple GMs we've had, but hey, the future's ahead. All right, boys, let's go into the first couple topics. The first part of the episode, which obviously if you guys are here, you heard it, or you can skip forward, that's fine too, listens. But to recap, the first part of the episode we recorded pre 4 p.m. on Saturday, which was before the 53-man roster became final. And now we are recording this at, 6:15 on a Sunday, so the cuts are all gone. Most of the claims have been made off the waiver wire. There are some trades going on in the NFL currently, but the Jets seem to be, 100% complacent with their roster as of right now. We have a couple claims to talk about. We'll start with the biggest claim. I guess it'll probably be the most impactful. And Scott, we'll start with you on this one, and that is the Jets claimed Will Tye, tight end from the New York Giants. I believe he's going into his 3rd year. Pretty productive player with, whatever they call themselves over there, the G-men, the boys in blue, the guys who support, criminals and stuff. But, he's on our side now. So, Scott, what's your opinion on this pickup?
I mean, it's a good idea, obviously, with Safarian Jenkins being out to start the season with the suspension. But we know that, by the way, Safarian Jenkins is going to be awesome this year because the Jet Take curse has been reversed.
Oh, yeah, so, it's great. You have no idea how much that curse, burdened us. We were booking players, and we're like, this guy may have a really bad year now because of us. It's not good for us.
But yeah, it's a good idea because Will Tye, like you said, a reasonably productive player for a tight end who's not, on that top level or whatever. He was always a pest. Whenever I would watch the Giants, and I root against them so hard, he would always make these little plays and be just a real pest. And so it'll be nice to see him on the Jets being a pest. He'll probably start week 1 if he can pick up the playbook, which I assume he can. And then we'll see what happens when Safarian Jenkins comes back. This may mean that another move is coming, maybe Tomlinson, maybe Vanderlaan. I don't know which one, but I would imagine they're not going to carry 4 tight ends or whatever it is because you have Jordan Leggett. But it's an interesting move, and I think Tye is an upgrade, at least in the short run. So I really have no complaints. I think it was a smart move by McCagnon.
Yeah, to note, Jason Vanderlaan, I believe that's how you say his name, was cut today. I believe.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. D.A., Mr. Councilman, the busy man himself, your thoughts on the Will Tye pickup?
Well, so, it's interesting to think that the Jets have gone from a tight end unit that had to pick up Safarian Jenkins in the middle of the year last year, right, take a flyer on him, to now having Jenkins, Tye, and Jordan Leggett. It's not Gronkowski, Graham, and Kelsey or anything like that, but it is a much improved unit in a short time. I think with Will Tye, you're talking about a guy, 90 catches, 860 yards, 4 touchdowns over the last 2 years, being essentially the fourth passing option in a Giants prolific passing attack, or what should be a Giants prolific passing attack. They drafted Evan Engram. That made him expendable. He's a decent enough blocker. He's a pretty good receiver. And what you're now allowed to do, because I do agree that Austin Seferian-Jenkins is going to have a pretty big year, but now what you do is you can run those 2 tight end sets to help your offensive line if they're struggling, because Jenkins has shown a commitment to blocking, and Ty is a decent enough blocker, like I said. So it's a good move. I think it made sense. And I think it's one of those things where need matches the player, because sometimes you'll see GMs take flyers on guys on waivers and they don't fit a need at all. It's just a name that you've taken because you feel like, oh, maybe we can get something out of him. But Will Tye in particular fits a need that the Jets have, especially with Seferian-Jenkins out for the first couple games. And I like his skill set. I like what he brings. So I think it's gonna mesh well. Like Scott said, if he can pick up the offense, there's no reason why he should not be starting next week in Buffalo.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, I don't think Jordan Leggett showed us a lot in the preseason. Obviously, he is a rookie, so there is a little more time to develop. But I think you guys hit it on the nose when he said, as long as he can pick up the playbook, he will be our starter week 1. And, D.A., you made a great point. ASJ, Will Tye, Jordan Leggett. I believe, if ASJ plays like we think he will, seeing as the curse has been reversed.
Right.
We have one of the better tight end cores in the NFL if, all these guys play like they should. And obviously Jordan Leggett might be like the odd man there that isn't necessarily the one who's going to perform as we hope. We do have 3 other claims, though, and I'm probably going to butcher these names. Sorry, guys, you're new to the team. The 3 other players that we claimed off of waivers, wide receiver, Demore, Stringfellow, another wide receiver, Khalif
Good
Raymond.
job.
Did I get that?
I think so. I think you nailed it. I was worried because I was like, this looks like some more. This looks like something else. But we'll make it work. I think you nailed it. I think you did well.
Boom. There we go. All right. And linebacker Edmund Robinson. I don't know if you guys have any information on him. If anybody wants to speak out about what they've seen from them.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'll take Stringfellow, I guess, and Raymond. I will take the 2 offensive guys. Scott, you can take the defensive guy. So Stringfellow is interesting because when I saw his name come across the waiver pickup, McCagnon has done a lot of work in the DB realm with his wife, right? Like, that's been a big thing for them. So when I saw Stringfellow's name, I was like, wow, that's interesting that they took a flyer on him. Considering his past history. For those of you that don't know, when he was at the University of Washington, and again, the more that we kind of hear about what was going on with the Huskies, there was a lot of craziness that was going on there. But Stringfellow was one of those guys who pleaded guilty to 2 counts of 4th-degree assault for a DB altercation, sentenced to 5 days on the work crew, and he had to transfer to Ole Miss, where he got arrested for disorderly conduct. So this is a guy that had a ton of character issues. In fact, he had so many character issues that he wasn't even invited to the Combine. And as you know, they invite anybody to the Combine. But you're talking about a guy with big enough size. He had a 99-yard reception in the preseason, a really good catch. And with his skill set, it probably means the end of Sharon Peak, I would imagine. Raymond, you're now adding a return specialist, and that's what they've needed. Like, you're not going to trot out the Axeman or Darius Stewart back there to return kicks and punts because he's going to be so vital to the offense. You don't want him to get hurt. Raymond is a punt returner. He had an 11.1 average on punts, 22.8 average on kickoffs, and he had a big 41-yard return. This reminds me a lot of when Denver decided to release Tristan Holliday, who, again, was a really good kick returner. And Elway makes these moves a couple times, like during the preseason, that make you scratch your head, like, he's not as smart as you think he is, and then he does something that really makes you remember that he is as smart as you think he is. But those 2, I think, you're talking about guys that are going to contribute on special teams. They're probably not going to contribute on the base offense. But for what the Jets needed, I think it makes sense. I'm just really surprised that the Jets took a flyer on Stringfellow when they could have just kept Peak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess they just needed a guy named Stringfellow. Don't we all?
Yeah. I really need that for my editing purposes. That's just going to be great for my autocorrect. Typing up an article and I'll put up shoestring or something on accident. I can already foresee this being a problem for me.
Yeah, Dalvin, every time I type your name, it autocorrects to Dalvin, so I think they think you're Dalvin. My phone thinks you're Dalvin Cook, man. I don't know.
I'm not mad at that. I am not mad at Dalvin Cook. I am not mad at that at all.
You could be way worse than that. I mean, Dalvin Cook. I know our buddy Jeff Lloyd is really looking forward to watching Dalvin this year. So
he would have been my number one if it wasn't for his injury issues. I feel like he was the best running back overall, but those injuries, it's hard to draft a guy like
scary.
that. Yeah,
definitely.
I'm just not willing to take a risk. Same reason I didn't really like Jay Ajayi out of Boise State, but this isn't draft season, not till tomorrow anyway.
Not till tomorrow.
Yeah. Let's talk about the 53-man roster. I believe it's finalized, pending, a possible trade or maybe another cut or waiver claim. We'll go by position by position. We'll start with the worst, obviously, quarterback. We kept everybody except Jason Vanderland. I guess he was a quarterback / tight end. I mean, we saw him get some reps at some point, so I guess we got to count him. But we retained the main guys, Josh McCown, Bryce Petty, Christian Hackenberg. We're expecting it to be in that order on the depth chart. Scott, your thoughts? Obviously, no shockers there, but do you think we could have got anybody else? Named Garrett Grayson was thrown around a little bit in the Jets' Twitter sphere. Do you think the Jets kept the right guys?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's no surprise here at all. Nobody thought Maccagnan was going to say, okay, Hackenberg looked terrible, I'm getting rid of him. He's just not going to admit that so quickly, especially when he risked a lot of his reputation to draft him as high as he did. Bryce Petty, I've been very clear. I think Bryce Petty showed us very clearly that he's not the guy at quarterback, but I have been encouraged with what I've seen in the preseason. Sorry, Kyle, but I have been, and maybe you'll like me better after I say this. I have been encouraged by what I've seen in the preseason. Now, granted, obviously he's playing backups, but he seems to be going through progressions. He looks more comfortable. I think there's a chance, and Joe Caparoso said something to this effect as well, I think there's a chance that he could turn into a respectable backup. And quite frankly, for everybody that's hammered the Bryce Petty pick, if Bryce Petty turns out to be a solid, steady backup, something the Jets really haven't had in a long time, in the fourth round, in the fourth round, it's not that bad of a pick in the end if he turns out to be that. So obviously they were keeping him. I had some doubts about it before the preseason started, but I think Petty kind of erased those doubts. And as far as McCown, look, I wrote a whole column about this, but Josh McCown's not here to be the bridge quarterback or the mentor or any of that for whatever, they want to sell you on that. But what he's here to be is the guy to just take the beating until either Hackenberg is ready to go or they get their draft pick next year and move along. He's basically a $6 million tackling dummy as far as I'm concerned, and he's perfect for the role that they want him to play, which is, let's be real, the Jets desperately want to get away from stories that involve negative attention, whether it was Revis getting in trouble this offseason or Sheldon Richardson having fights with Brandon Marshall or Fitzpatrick holding them up with his ski mask demanding $12 million or whatever it was. I think McCown is a guy that's always going to stay under the radar. He says the right things. He just kind of does his job. He doesn't complain. He's not going to make hay. There's going to be no headlines because of him, any of that. So from that perspective, that's the role that he serves. So I think really Hackenberg sticks because Maccagnan's still holding out some deep, dark hope that he'll deliver in some way. Petty sticks because they think maybe he can turn into a respectable backup. And Josh McCown sticks because he's basically going to be the equivalent of a 1980s WWF jobber who stands in the ring, already in the ring, Joe Smith or whatever. So that's pretty much my take on the quarterback.
Doesn't even need an intro. No pyro for him at all. He's just in the ring waiting. Yeah, I mean, Scott nailed it, man.
When he's injured.
Absolutely. No, Scott. So Scott nailed it. The only difference that I think I would say is that the one thing that when the Jets drafted Bryce Petty, I wrote an article for TOJ where I said that Bryce Petty shouldn't see the field at all that coming year, right? And my rationale for it was that if you wanted to give him the best possible chance to turn into something, and again, not saying that I knew what Bryce Petty would be. I didn't think that he could be a starter in this league, but you give your young quarterbacks a much higher chance at succeeding if you sit them because they're able to learn behind a veteran. They're able to get used to the speed of the game, right? Those things happen. What Bryce Petty has done from the moment he came out of Baylor until this preseason, because obviously the season hasn't started, is he's earned the right to be the first young quarterback to go under censor for the Jets, right? And he's done that by putting in the work. Now, does that mean that I think Bryce Petty's going to suddenly become the next Russell Wilson if he starts this year? No, I don't know if that. I don't think that's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is he's earned the right, and there's something to be said for a young player who comes in and does the work, right? Like a lot of people hated the fact that they thought Mark Sanchez was super entitled and that he got handed everything, right? Even though I'm not necessarily sure if that's true. But again, you also took a guy top 5 overall. Yes, he should be your starter, right? With Bryce Petty, nothing's been handed to him. He wasn't handed the backup job. He wasn't handed the backup job this year. He wasn't handed the starting job. He just came in and he outworked Christian Hackenberg. And that's the biggest thing, is that he's come in and he did not take it as a demotion. He didn't take it as a slap in the – or maybe he did take it as a slap in the face, but he kept that inside and he just did the work. And it showed up in games, right? So you saw his footwork was better. He wasn't driving the ball off his back foot as much as he was doing last year. He was also showing some touch, which he showed in the Robbie Anderson route against Miami when he lofted the ball and was able to hit Robbie in stride and he was able to take it to the house. But you didn't see enough of that last year. You saw a lot of that this preseason. So for me, I'm with you, Scott. I think McCown is absolutely just the placeholder till we get to next year. But Bryce Petty has earned the right where you have to give him. I'd rather see Bryce Petty play now than I would ever want to see Christian Hackenberg play, because the mistakes that Hackenberg's making are, for me, unfixable mistakes. Like, there's things that you're not going to get better at. Bryce Petty, on the other hand, the things that he needed to get better at are things you can work with a young quarterback on. Can you play under center? You're coming from a spread option in Baylor. Can you play under center? Can you stop throwing off your back foot? Can you stop throwing across your body? Because, again, the scheme in college football, it's so easy to just to get away with these mistakes. Pat Mahomes got away with them all the time at Texas Tech, right? And now you see it. Even when Mahomes when they played against the Bengals, he threw it across his body, and what happened? The DB jumped the route, and he almost took it to the house. So you can't make those mistakes. But Bryce Petty, what he's done is he's fixed those mistakes. And I just don't see. And again, best case scenario, a 4th-round pick turns into a spot starter and a high-end backup. That's a win for McCagnon, I think. That's an absolute win. And that's more of a win than cutting your losses with Christian Hackenberg. I would have cut him. I would have picked up Brad Kaya. I'd try to pick up Brandon Allen, the guy that the Jaguars cut. I'd try to get rid of him because for me, I think Christian Hackenberg is exactly who he is, and you're not going to fix that. And I would much rather invest the reps that I have this year into a guy like Bryce Petty, who I can turn into something. I don't know what it is, but I have more hope to turning him into something than I do Christian Hackenberg.
Absolutely, and I agree completely. And, if I was the coach, I would stop with the charade. It's clear the Jets are trying to lose. I think we hinted towards it yesterday. It was all a grand scheme to lose. Start Petty. At least develop, in my opinion, I don't care what anybody else says, I think he's proven it time after time, the most ready and talented quarterback, on this roster. Hackenberg could have all the arm strength he wants. Hackenberg can make all the adjustments on the line he wants. If you can't hit an open receiver, which we've seen multiple times throughout the preseason, throughout college, and throughout last year's preseason, you're nothing. You're nothing in the NFL. I don't care if you can identify the most complex defenses in the NFL. If you can't hit Robbie Anderson wide open like 9 times out of 10, you're nothing to me. You will be cut. And if Christian Hackenberg was not a second-round pick 2 years removed, he would not be on this roster. And same thing goes with Bryce Petty. This isn't a bias in any way. I just think Bryce Petty has proven a lot more. Bryce Petty, as you were saying, he wasn't given anything this year. Like these younger quarterbacks who are being drafted high, they're given everything. They're just starters from day one. Bryce Petty came in, he had Fitzpatrick in front of him, didn't really get a fair chance. Geno Smith in front of him, he didn't beat out Geno Smith. We're here now. Everybody's saying, Christian Hackenberg, he's going to get more reps. We see Christian Hackenberg get more reps throughout the offseason, during practice, during the games, and he just wasn't performing well. Bryce Petty wasn't even given a roster spot at first. Bryce Petty came in, he put in the work, he proved a hell of a lot than he has in the past, and I think he's proven that he is the best quarterback on this team, which isn't saying anything. That's not saying he's our savior. That's not saying he's a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. That's not saying he's a top 25. He's just the best quarterback on this roster, and I will stick to that because I think the film shows so. And that's just where I think the Jets should be, but I understand why they went with McCown. All right, let's talk about the running backs. We got some old guys. We got some young guys. Let's see. Matt Forte, Bilal Powell, Elijah McGuire, and Julian Hauser as the fullback. fullback incorporation into the NFL seems to be a little revamped. We're seeing that more and more from teams. You know, it died for a little bit, but remember, fullbacks are people too. We cut Anthony Fursker, Romar Morris, Jihad Thomas, and Marcus Murphy. Marcus Murphy, he was recently featured on my Stock Down portion of the Stock Up, Stock Down for Week 4's preseason. Didn't do too well. Honestly, couldn't tell you who Jihad Thomas is. Romar Morris just didn't stand out at all this year. And Anthony Fursker had a couple drops in the preseason. So I don't think there's any surprises there. DA, you go ahead and hit on these guys who we kept. And maybe your thoughts on who should be the true workhorse of this team. We've heard throughout the offseason, Stump Mitchell been saying, oh, yeah, Bilal could be a Pro Bowler if he was the number one, but then continues to say they'll be 50-50. So, DA, give me your opinion on that. Were you surprised by any cuts? Are you happy with the guys we kept?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I think Stump has mastered coach speak already in saying one thing and doing something else. Because, I mean, sure. I like Bilal Powell as much as the next guy, but we've seen what happens when he gets extensive carries. Like, he usually gets banged up. I think Bilal is extremely talented. He's not a guy I would want to give 280 carries to. It's just not what I would do. However, I do think that it's funny because I hear that, and then I see Matt Forte get like 9 carries for like 40 yards against the Giants, and I'm like, well, what the hell is going on? And I hear that the Jets are shopping him, but if you're really shopping them, you just take a 5th or a 6th round pick or whatever the case may be. I'm sure a team has been offering that. So no, I'm not surprised by anybody they kept, anybody they cut. I'm surprised that Forte is still on this roster, that he hasn't been moved. I think that Forte needs to be moved in order for Elijah McGuire to get more carries, because McGuire is the guy that I think I would build the running game around, at least for this year. Now, does that mean that McGuire is going to be like Jordan Howard from the Bears? No, that doesn't mean that at all. But I think that he deserves more carries, and it's carries that would be wasted on Matt Forte. So when I hear Stump Mitchell talk all these, we're going to find a way to use Matt Forte correctly. The way that I would use him correctly is to put him on a train out of here. Like, that's the way you handle it. Like, I wouldn't try to manufacture touches. Yeah, exactly. Let Hackenberg carry his bag to the train station and say, we bought you 2 train tickets. Goodbye. Like, for me, I don't think that there is any reason why Forte is still on this roster, and that worries me because Forte's the kind of guy, like, again, he's a professional, right? He doesn't make a stink. Like you mentioned this, Kyle, about how the Jets are trying to move on from these, the Ryan Fitzpatrick type quarterbacking, which is what McCown does. I think you touched on this a little bit too, Scott. Like, you want a guy who's not going to bring the attention to himself. It's kind of why you see Sheldon Richardson gone, right? It's kind of why you saw Brandon Marshall gone. You don't want those kind of guys. Forte's very much a quiet guy. He's not an attention seeker. He's not going to make a stink if he doesn't get the ball. He's not going to go to the media and say, coach didn't give me the rock or whatever. He's not going to do that. But that's great and all. You're a nice guy. Goodbye. I would find a way to move him soon, and I would try to go get a guy like Jonathan Williams, who I was really surprised Buffalo cut. He had a really nice preseason. Buffalo's doing a lot of – Buffalo, I think, is trying to out-tank the tank. Like, when in basketball they used to say that the Sixers GM was overthinking the tank? Like, I think that's what's happening with Buffalo. They are overthinking the tank because your team is already bad enough. Like, you don't need to keep getting rid of talented people. But the fact that they're like, no, we are going to trust Mike Tolbert as the number 2 running back in case Shady gets hurt, I'm like, man, you guys are really going for that number 1 spot. But Williams would be the guy that I would kind of target to replace Forte, because I think he's a guy that's young enough to contribute. I saw that they signed Alex Collins from Arkansas to the practice squad. I'd bring him up and get rid of Forte too. Like, it just anything that goes to.
Actually, I hate to cut you off, DA, but Alex Collins officially has renounced the Jets as his team and went inside with Baltimore. Yeah. Okay, so then I retract that. But I think any rep that goes to anybody over 29 this year is a joke. Like, I think we're done with that. And so again, Jonathan Williams would be a guy that I would go for. Alex Collins, I retract saying that you were good at Arkansas. You were a bum. You went to Baltimore. We didn't want you. Yeah. I don't know.
He's about to run campaign ads against you now for that, Dalton. So I'm
waiting for it.
You're in the Baltimore area. That's not good. Yeah. I'll mute that for you. I'll do you a favor there. That could come back to haunt you around election time. Biased Jets fan goes against Ravens star. Okay, let's talk about tight ends. Scott, I'll let you touch on this one first. We retained Jordan Leggett, obviously our draft pick, Eric Tomlinson, and we claimed Will Tye off waivers, as we've said numerous times so far. We cut Brandon Barnes, Jason Bondelan, and Austin Seferian-Jenkins is suspended for the first 2 games, so he doesn't count against the roster. And we placed Chris Gregg, a guy who was a little bit of a standout during the preseason, had some nice plays, made some nice blocks from what I saw in film. We put him on the injured reserve. I think that's only for half the year because he was not on the injured reserve it was some sort last year. There was like a rule, but it looks like he'll come back by like week 7, week 8, so that would be good news. Scott, first thing, who do you think will get cut when Austin Seferian-Jenkins comes back from his suspension out of the group of Jordan Leggett, Eric Tomlinson, and Will Tye?
Well, first, real quick, just to circle back to running backs real fast. It's funny, I was talking to my father the other day, and he said, do you believe they're shopping Matt Forte? What do they want to get rid of every single player on this team that has any ability? And I'm like, not only can I believe it, I would shop Bilal Powell too. I would trade Powell too. Why not? I mean, I like Powell. He's a nice player, but he's 29, and what good? Give some carries to McGuire, pick up a couple of young guys like that Dalvin was mentioning that you could pick up, like Williams or somebody like that you can give some carries to. I don't understand why you wouldn't trade Powell and Forte, but I guess we'll see what happens. Maybe Powell gets traded to a contender around the deadline or something. But getting back to tight ends. Look, we talked about this a little bit before. I think ultimately what it comes down to is Ty is a guy who's shown that he can be fairly productive in a good offense. You know that he can block a little bit, he can catch, so that's good. Austin Seferian-Jenkins is the guy that we're all kind of hoping breaks out and becomes a real player this year. I think there's a good chance of it. He's always been a guy that I've loved his talent. I loved him at University of Washington. But he just was, let's be honest, let's call it for what it is. He was an absolute knucklehead when he got to Tampa. He had opportunities, and he just self-destructed, right? So he gets to the Jets. He's got a second lease on life, and he seems to be really taking things seriously. By all accounts, he's working really hard. He's shed a lot of weight. He's been showing that athleticism that he had as a basketball player at the University of Washington is coming into play as far as the ability to make – I mean, we saw what happened in the 4th game where he made that great catch. So there's a lot to be hopeful for there. The one thing I will say is I'm a little disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I'm a little disappointed that Vanderlaan went, only because I know he worked so hard to transition from quarterback to tight end, and that he, by all accounts, had made a lot of progress since last year. You remember the Jets had cut him, then they signed him to a futures deal, and then they brought him back. And you heard a lot of stories about how he had really progressed and started to become a legitimate receiving threat as a tight end, and then now he goes. Who knows, at some point he could be back. I don't know. I'm assuming somebody else will snap him up at a certain point. Tomlinson, I don't know. I mean, I would have kept Vanderlaan over Tomlinson. I just don't see any value with Tomlinson at all, but I guess he's a better blocker, so he's a better fit for what they're looking for. But I don't know. I would have let him go. I don't see a whole lot of value there. I think Vanderlaan has at least some long-term potential. But I think the tight end group, which is and you obviously Leggett, who's going to come in, and he really needs to learn to block because by his own admission, he was erratic and he's not really much of a blocker. He's going to have to learn it. I actually compared him to a bit of a poor man's Dustin Keller. And Dustin Keller's another guy who came in with a lot of high hopes, and he was very erratic. And there were games where he looked like he was going to be that stud tight end that they've been waiting for, and then in the end he would kind of flame out a little bit. Realistically, this team hasn't had a good, solid, dependable receiving option at tight end over a decent period of time since Johnny Mitchell, and you're going back now almost 25 years, because Johnny Mitchell was gone in 96, but he got drafted, I believe, in the 91 or 92 draft. So you're going back a long ways to Johnny Mitchell. And so we'll see what happens with it. I'm optimistic with Seferian-Jenkins, and I'm optimistic that Leggett can kind of build on some things. But overall, I'm definitely, I guess I would say I'm seeing the sky being clear blue, because this is the first year probably since they drafted Keller that I've expected literally anything from the tight end position.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think Scott nailed it. I think that, yeah, I mean, you're talking about Johnny Mitchell, Kyle Brady, there's a list. Like, everybody likes to talk about the lack of franchise quarterback and the lack of an edge rusher, which I get. Like, that's absolutely, like, yes, but the gap from Johnny Mitchell to Dustin Keller, and even that, Keller was a solid tight end, right? But it definitely felt like a lack of, like he just did not reach his full potential. It's been a long time since the Jets have had a tight end like Austin Seferian-Jenkins, heck, a tight end just like Jordan Leggett, or even a tight end like Will Tye. Like, the tight end has been so non-existent. Jeff Cumberland, for all his glory, was a guy who sat here and ripped the Jets coaching staff for not using him the right way, and then didn't do anything with his chance in San Diego with Phillip Rivers and got cut. I think that realistically, I'm with Scott. This is the first time in a long time that I'm expecting anything from the quarterback position. I think Tomlinson's the guy that goes and Seferian-Jenkins returns. And honestly, I think Seferian-Jenkins is going to have a monster year for this team.
Yeah, I've been talking to Austin a lot lately. I think we can call ourselves friends. He might fight me over that, but he's committed. He's a committed individual. He's doing it for the team. He really wants to redeem himself. Obviously, people, they talk when you're in the news. Oh, look at him, 2 DUIs in like a 5-year span. That doesn't look good for anybody. He's motivated. Right. He's doing it for himself, his teammates. He's doing it for his last name. Put some respect on it. And I really think he's going to have a great year. And I wouldn't honestly, we don't have a quarterback. But if we had a quarterback, he would be a Pro Bowler, in my opinion. Towards the end of the year, he would definitely have those type of stats. All right, we'll briefly go over the offensive line because I know this is starting to get a little lengthy. Just to, recap, we retain, and I'll do it by starter and backup. Left tackle is going to be Kelvin Beachum. Left guard going to be James Carpenter. Center, Wesley Johnson. Right guard, Brian Winters. And right tackle right now looks like it's going to be Brandon Shell. Behind them, behind the first line, which has struggled throughout the preseason, to note, the backups for the O-line are Brett Quale, who could, switch between right guard, right tackle, possibly even left tackle from times if you needed him. Pretty useful guy. Ben Ajalana, left tackle, right tackle, kind of swing guy there. Dakota Dozier, basically a guard center backup. And Jonathan Harrison, who actually performed pretty well in the preseason, regardless of what the crap I like to talk about him. He will be our backup center. We cut Alex Balducci. Can't even tell you what position he plays, if I'm going to be honest. Chris Borderland, same thing. Ben Braden, Jeff Adams, Javarius Lemon, and Craig Watts, who plays guard. And we put Ben Braden, who was a cut, onto the practice squad. So, any surprises there, guys, or is that what we expected?
About what I expected. I think the only surprise was Watts, who I thought had done a little bit to show a little bit of versatility. But no surprises for me. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, it's one of those things where we kind of have to be patient with the offensive line in the sense that a lot of these guys are young and inexperienced, and so you can't really expect a whole lot. There weren't any surprises as far as who got cut and who didn't get cut. And if somebody shakes loose that we're not expecting at some point, shockingly in the next week or so before the season starts, then maybe they take a flyer. But we kind of know what to expect from these guys. There's going to be a lot of growing pains. They look bad in the preseason. I'm optimistic that Shell might be able to turn into something, even though he's been a disaster in the preseason. And the only two guys on this offensive line that I'm not completely, I guess you would say, not enamored by, that the only guys that I think are capable starters right now off the bat are the two guards. So we have to hope that the other guys around them, Shell and Johnson and even the backups like Dakota Dozier, that was one of the last remaining members of the Idzik regime. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So we have to hope that some of those guys develop into something. But right now, the two guards are the only ones that I have any faith in. We'll see what happens. It's not a unit that's especially strong, but we kind of knew that.
Yeah, and, I don't think the quarterbacks are going to help them this year, as you guys well know. And for the listeners who don't know, when you don't have a good quarterback, you know what defenses do? They put 8 guys in the box, and they say, throw it. I dare you. Mm-hmm. I want to see you be successful because they know they can't be successful. Even if you have Robbie Anderson, who could stretch the field and beat almost any cornerback in the NFL, he can be wide open in the middle of the field. Likely nobody's going to get him the ball. So look for the O-line to be terrible this year. Look for the running backs to be terrible this year and be the ultimate demise to the Jets season, even though we're not really trying. All right, let's go to the other side of the trenches. there is a piece missing here. We traded Sheldon Richardson. We got the second-round pick in return and Jermaine Kearse. We addressed that in the first part of the episode. The guys we have remaining on the roster are, we'll start at left end, Muhammad Wilkerson, defensive tackle / nose tackle, Steve McClendon, right end, Leonard Williams coming off his Pro Bowl season. Backups likely going to be Mike Pennell, Coney Ely, and Claude Pallone. I think all deserve to make the roster. I think Coney Ely, I don't think him getting cut from New England was a detriment to his talent or his motor or any of that. I just think, like as Belichick said, he just wasn't really a fit in their system. That's okay. That happens from time to time. But I think this is a talented guy, a guy who really impressed in the Super Bowl, a guy with a lot of talent. Mizzou pass rusher. I didn't even think about that. We got rid of a Mizzou pass rusher and got another one. And
his cousin, too, actually.
His cousin. Yeah, Coney Ely is Sheldon's cousin.
So they practiced for like a day, and they were like, oh, my God, this is great. We got the Mizzou cousins back. And then, no.
Yeah, and then that ended. Ended. It was very much like the Steiner. It was very much like the Steiner brothers reunion for all of
yes.
Before Big Papa Pump turned on Rick. No, I mean, the defensive line group, man, I think it's a good group. I think Mo is going to bounce back. I think that it's hard coming back from a broken leg like he did, but kudos to him for trying to come back. I don't particularly care for his desire to go through the media and bash the team towards the end of last year. I think that is some coward nonsense. That is better reserved for people who do not use the @ button on Twitter instead of, a grown-ass man like Mo Wilkerson. But I think he's going to have a good season. I think he's going to bounce back. Leonard Williams is the best defensive lineman that they have. Coney Ely, you're right, Kyle. I think a lot of people were sitting there scoffing, saying, well, oh, my God, Belichick didn't need him, so obviously he's got to be bad. And that's not really true, because Belichick got rid of Chandler Jones, and it wasn't because Chandler Jones was bad. He also got rid of Richard Seymour. It wasn't because Seymour was bad. He got rid of Revis, and Revis still had a pretty good year. The first year that he came back here, it was last year that he got beat like the top of a dreidel. He got spun like the top of a dreidel. Like Belichick does make mistakes sometimes, and I think with Coney Ely, he's young enough where he doesn't affect the tank in the sense of like, he's only going to be here for a year and then you get rid of him. No, this could be a guy that becomes that edge rusher that the Jets have needed, especially with a guy like Lorenzo Malden, who had struggled last year because he bulked up and started to look like a hamburglar. Yeah, but no, the curse has been reversed, so we are okay now. Malden should be fine, but I do think Coney Ely lights a fire under him because Ely, you saw that. Jets claim him off waivers. First game, he has a strip sack and a fumble. That motor is going to be there. He's going to be motivated. I think he's going to be fine. The surprise for me was them cutting Deion Simon, though. I mean, I know they got him on the practice squad, which, again, I mean, you run the risk of that happening, but I was very surprised that they went with Claude Pallone, who, honest to God, I didn't see him flash at all preseason. And I thought Deion Simon played really well during the preseason. So to see him get let go was very surprising. But he's now on the practice squad, so now you got to hope that no other team takes him.
And Scott, I don't know if you wanted to jump in here, but quickly on the Deion Simon in favor of, or Claude Pallone over Deion Simon. I think Claude Pallone, I was actually quite impressed with him. He didn't make a lot of flashy plays, but I definitely saw him, on the interior, lining up as the 0-tech, 1-tech. He was definitely, a force towards the end of the games. I understand he's playing against backups, but still there's something to build on there. I think Deion Simon's kind of had like his years. This is his second year, and there was really never a time where I was just like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and make a T-shirt about him. So, yeah. Oh, Ben's going to go me for that one. Yeah. Simon says leave. But he's back now. I like Claude Pallone. I think there's talent to build off there. I think he hasn't gotten a fair opportunity with a guy like Deion Simon and Steve McClendon in front of him, for the past couple, years, basically, the past 2 years. So I kind of like that. Deion Simon's on our practice squad, so we didn't lose him. He's just not going to be playing games, and I'm sure he'll be called up at some point this year. But I think that Claude Pallone may just be a better fit. Scott, your opinion?
Yeah, just to jump in and add a little bit to what both of you guys said, I'm glad that they kept Simon because I do think that he has potential to be at least a rotational, solid defensive lineman. He looked too flash a little bit in the preseason, and like I was talking about in part one a little bit when I said that I was surprised that he got cut, it seemed like Maccagnan really saw a lot in him, that they thought he could be eventually the Snacks replacement. At least that was what you heard a lot from Charlie Casserly. And when Charlie Casserly speaks, you can see Mike Maccagnan with the string in the background, because obviously being his mentor and everything, you know that that's basically Maccagnan talking. Pallone,
it's like Steve Bannon and Trump. There's just like a big hand, you know, flapping the flapper there.
Yep, that's true.
I'm not touching that one. That you guys can, do whatever you want with that. But I will say that Pallone, I'm with Dalvin on this one. I didn't see much, but I wasn't at practice every day, so maybe they saw something that I didn't. I think Mo bounces back this year. The injury takes a while to really fully recover from, and I think he was too proud to really admit until the end that maybe he was kind of out of his depth trying to play with the remnants of that injury last year, and that was a lot of what caused him to struggle. We'll see. I'm optimistic with him. Leonard Williams is Leonard Williams, and I don't know what else to say. He's one of the better defensive linemen in the league. He's a rising star. McClendon is a guy that if he plays well, sell. Trade him at the trading deadline if you can get any kind of pick. Why not? McClendon's a reasonably decent player, but I mean, what do you need him for on this team, really, realistically? And beyond that, the defensive line is going to be the strength of this team. I will say, with Sheldon gone, I'm glad that Coney Ely is here, and I'm sure my pal Eric McMillan would agree, because you need at least one star on the defense to be from the University of Missouri, and so now you have Coney Ely, just like you had Sheldon, and years ago you had Eric McMillan. And by the way, if you want to hear more from a Missouri star, namely Eric McMillan, part 1, and this is the cheap plug, folks, part 1 of Play Like a Jet, the 1988 season dropped on Friday, so check it out at turnthejets.com and iTunes, talking to Eric McMillan. It's going to be Eric McMillan month this September on Play Like a Jet as we go through 1988, and trust me, he's got some amazing stories, and hopefully one day I can interview Coney Ely, and he'll have some great stories for me too.
Ooh, let's hope so. And maybe there's not a curse for your podcast, but the curse has been reversed. So that's good. Just a note, also defensive linemen that were cut or released, however they want to phrase it, means the same thing. Jeremy Falk, Patrick Gamble, Lawrence Thomas, and we placed Anthony Johnson on the injured reserve. And as we mentioned a couple times, Deion Ziman reverted to the practice squad after he went unclaimed. Let's talk about the linebackers. They're not very good. They're not very talented, but there are a couple guys who really work their butt off and really pray to Jesus on this team. So let's look forward to it. Linebackers, Deron Lee, no, he hasn't earned his name yet. Demario Davis, Jordan Jenkins, Josh Martin, slated to be the starters for the year. And then behind them, Julian Stanford, Dylan Donahue, Lorenzo Maldman, and Edmund Robinson, who we claimed off waivers and we talked about a little bit earlier. Any shocks there? I mean, Bruce Carter, Freddie Bishop, I thought they were guys who might have made the team, possibly Frank Beltray, or Frank Beltray could have made the team, but he didn't. So, guys, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, Bruce Carter was the biggest surprise, because I think Carter brings a lot of special teams value, and I think that the Jets used him really weirdly last year. So I figured, I was like, you know what, he probably has a really good shot this year. Beltray, I feel like we heard his name a lot in practice, like just getting to the quarterback, but now I'm realizing that doesn't really mean much because the offensive line is so bad. So maybe that's why they let go of my man Frank Adrian Beltray. But I was surprised by him because his name flashed a lot, and I was surprised by the Bruce Carter release. But I think it's an interesting group, and I did say earlier that the Bills cut Gerald Hodges, so he would be. I wanted Maccagnan to take a flyer on him in the spring. He's a guy that I would try to. Him? I am. I'm going to send him, some green and white cupcakes, and we're going to have Scott send some Jamaican soup up, and it's going to be really good.
There you go.
I think we're going to convince him to come aboard, because
I think with that soup, and we're going to get him. You trust me on that.
No, I absolutely believe you. But the thing on the field that he brings and what he allows you to do is he allows you to play Lee off the edge a lot more. It lets you take advantage of the athleticism and his skill set to get to the quarterback, because I think too often the Jets tried to play Deron Lee like as if he was David Harris. They try to play him in a thumper role, and that's not really who he is. Like, he's much more an athletic guy. He may be a guy who's honestly more athlete than football player right now, but I would want to use that athleticism. For example, good coaching staffs figure out a way to use their talent, not try try to make the talent fit the scheme. And so, for example, if he was in Seattle, I would trust Pete Carroll to probably start using him as an edge rusher, similar to how they use Bruce Irvin, right? That's kind of what I think they would do. And that's what I would do if I was the Jets. And adding Hodges would allow you to do that. And then it would probably mean that you'd have to cut one of these guys that you kept. But Bruce Carter was the biggest surprise. I would go and sign Gerald Hodges, though.
Yeah, I don't think there were major surprises. Like you said, I guess Carter was the biggest one, but he was one of the older players, so, I mean, whatever at this point. It's just kind of, if you're over the age of, 24, you're on the chopping block with the Jets.
And don't sign the lease. Don't sign the lease, so they're not keeping you.
You go month to month. You don't sign that 1-year lease when you're over the age of 24 around the Jets. But, I mean, really, these are guys that are going to have to sing for their supper this year. Darren Lee looked improved, but we all know he struggled at times last year. A lot of people blame that on the foot injury, and maybe that's the case. We'll see. He's done some knuckleheaded things in the offseason, although I will say he did allow me to get Luke Perry of 90210 fame back in the headlines for a few minutes. So thank you to Darren Lee. Thank you to Darren Lee for that one.
I don't even know.
Okay. Dalvin, I don't know, man. We may have to hang up on young Kyle here for that. That's some disrespect right there. But
it's the over 29 thing.
It's got to be what it is. But don't you diss Dylan McKay like that again in our presence,
don't do it.
Man.
There's only one Dylan McKay.
There is only one Dylan McKay. But not, you've got. And Dalvin and I were both very early on the train with Dylan Donahue. He looked good in practice from everything you heard, but in the preseason he didn't do a lot. He was hurt a little bit, and we'll see what happens with him. I'm still optimistic that if he gets his opportunity, that he could get 5 to 6 sacks in situational things, because he's a guy that has a very high motor. And he can get to the quarterback. If you're going back and watch his tape from college, I will say also I'm hopeful that he does well, because I was very vocal about how well I thought he would do. So A, I'll look bad if he doesn't, and B, he'll remember it if he does do well, and maybe I could get him to come on Play Like a Jet and talk about the year 2017 or something like that. So self-serving purposes there, but we'll see if Jenkins can take a step forward. I think that if he stays healthy, I don't think he's going to be like somebody dynamic, but he might be able to be the new Calvin Pace, which is good because, Calvin Pace was here for approximately 865 seasons. So there's got to be somebody there to there's got to be somebody there to pick up that slack in the year 2060. We've got to have somebody there. Jordan Jenkins is coming up with a wheelchair or whatever to play outside linebacker. I think this is a group that – right. But I think ultimately this is a group that has some players that are young and have flashed some ability, and now we're going to see what they can do. I don't think there's anybody there that you look at as proven. DeMario Davis, I like his attitude. We'll see if he's any better than he was the first stint. I'm not optimistic necessarily, but he does bring a nice leadership quality there. I just think that this is a young group. We'll see if guys like Lee and Jenkins take that step forward. And that's really all. Look, 2017 is about the development of the young players, period, end of sentence. And so if these guys, any of them become players, then we look to 2018, because really the slogan of the Jets this season should be 2017 New York Jets, just wait till you see what we do in the draft, right? So
yeah. New York Jets on the clock.
Valid.
Find that on turnonthejets.com. Yeah, I'm a sellout too. All right, let's talk about the secondary. We'll start with safeties because I'm looking at the roster and it says safeties specifically, so that's easy for me. Retained, obviously, Jamal Adams, Marcus May, going to be our starters, first round, second round picks of the draft from this year. I forgot the year. I was going to say the year. Then behind them, Terrence Brooks, Rontez Miles, both box safeties. We really don't have a coverage safety, guys. It's kind of concerning. We cut our Armageddon, but his jerseys are still on sale. I'm sure you'll be able to find them on clearance in a Dick's Sporting Goods or Modell's or wherever you guys are. That'll be a great jersey to have.
Free advertising for Dick's and Modell's.
Yeah. Oh, crap. Damn it. I did it again, guys. My bad. Shamarko Thomas. Robinson Thursday. Wow. Thursday. I don't know how to say his last name. And then the injured reserve, Doug Middleton. Any shocks there, guys? I think that was pretty set in stone.
No shocks. That was pretty straightforward, right, Scott? I don't think any of those names were like, oh wow, that's kind of crazy that they made the team.
Yeah, nothing surprised me at all, really. The only thing that I was surprised by happened before the cutdown is when they traded McDougal. He started to look like he might become a productive player, and then they just up and got rid of him. I don't know. I guess Brooks, who played mostly special teams last year, we'll see what he can bring to the table as a safety. I was surprised about the fact that they would take a guy like McDougal, who was finally starting to show signs, and ship him out of town for relatively nothing. But this group is very much, with the exception of Buster Skrine, and by the way, I hate to be redundant here, but he's over a certain age, and if he plays even reasonably well, sell on him if you can get anything for him around the deadline or even after the season. There's not a lot of experience here. You've got guys like Burris at corner and Darryl Roberts, and at safety you got the two rookies. Although, listen, if those two rookies do anywhere near as well as Eric McMillan and James Hasty did in 1988, which was really the last time that the Jets had two defensive backs that were going to come in and start right away. If those two guys can be as successful as Hasty and McMillan were in their first year and going forward, I think that'll be a very positive thing for the team. So, again, this is all, let's see what these young players do, and let's see where they fit for 2018, because 2017 is basically just an audition. It kind of feels in a way like the movie Major League, where it's like, oh, you're auditioning for either a job with the team when they move to Miami or to go somewhere else at the end of the season. That's kind of what this feels like with a lot of the young players. They're auditioning for a spot either on the 2018 team or with somebody else in 2018, and that 2017 is just about showing what they can do beyond 2017, because really nothing that they do this year is going to matter in the context of the season, because the Jets, even in the best case scenario, will not win more than 6 or 7 games.
Yeah. Was Major League the one with Charlie Sheen in it?
Correct.
Yeah, that's the one.
Throw him the fastball. All right.
It is also the movie that if you see Jeff Lloyd and I talking to each other, we generally will make at least 12 references to that movie on at least a daily basis. So if you watch the movie, it'll make your interactions with Jeff and I a lot smoother, I would say, young Kyle.
Yeah, Podfather and Scott having a tweet war would just be amazing. All right, let's talk a little bit about the corners. Also, not good. I guess we'll just start with Marcus Williams, Justin Burris, Morris Claiborne, Buster Skrine, Dale Roberts, and my boy Derek Jones. Friends with him now, so that's cool. I'm happy that he made the roster. Wasn't a necessary lock, so I'm happy he's there. I guess we'll start, with the starters. Morris Claiborne, I guess he's going to be our number one. Hasn't looked too good in preseason, at least in my opinion. Definitely got exposed in that Detroit game by Marvin Jones a couple times. Gave up a couple chunk plays. I guess technically number 2 on the depth chart would be Buster Skrine, the worst slot corner in the NFL. But we all know he's like our 5th best corner. So I guess truly number 2 it's probably going to be Justin Burris, who has also struggled this preseason. Behind him, Marcus Williams, then Darryl Roberts, Buster Skrine, and then Derek Jones, who's still learning the game. We cut David Rivers and Xavier Coleman. We placed Bryson Keaton on the injured reserve. And the non-football injury list consists of Jeremy Clark, the 7th-round draft pick, a guy I really liked out of Michigan. I talked about him a little bit on the show before we drafted him, exactly what Todd Bowles looks for. And Xavier Coleman, Ben's boy, he went to Ben's high school. Ben thinks he's like God on earth, even though my high school has like 3 Super Bowl champions, but it's okay. He has been reverted to the practice squad after he did make a couple nice plays during the preseason. So I'm not gonna say Ben was wrong or anything, but I'm just saying, we had Brian Stork, so top that. He just, by the way, a little off topic, Brian Stork, he just sits in a local bar now. When my dad goes out on Friday nights, he just sees him in there in his overalls and his John Deere hat. Yeah.
Poor guy.
I don't know why he retired. I honestly don't. He could have had another Super Bowl, and we also had Zeke Mata on the Falcons, but he was suspended because of PEDs, but we don't bring that up. Life
does indeed come at you fast. Jesus.
Hey, I mean, he still wears his ring. He wears his ring out and about. He's a millionaire, so I think he's good. And he comes. My town's pretty. It's a good town. I'll say it like that. So I don't think he really has to worry about anything. But I definitely think he should have stayed in football. But any thoughts, any shocks about the cornerbacks? Any guys you wish we kept? DA, we'll start with you.
I guess I'm just still surprised that Buster Skrine is on this team. I would have moved him and kept McDougal. That was a real head scratcher for Maccagnan, I felt, because I thought, I mean, like you guys said, I think McDougal was starting to flash. Scott had said this. He was starting. I think he had a really good preseason, and then to move him for a safety that that doesn't fit what you're trying to do. Because again, if you wanted to keep a box safety, keep Calvin Pryor if that's what you wanted to do. So it just didn't make much sense to me. I think that they need something else to back up Adams and May, because again, you have Miles, and I think Miles is fine. I maybe would have kept Shamarko Thomas, who provides a little bit more range. He showed that at Michigan State. I don't know. I'm surprised at some of the decisions in the secondary, because again, also you're banking on Morris Claiborne being healthy, but like Scott said, he got cooked by Marvin Jones, and that worries me too, because I'm like, Marvin Jones isn't even that good a receiver, and you're starting week 1 against Jordan Matthews, who's a really good route runner. Then you have Amari Cooper. Then you have Jarvis Landry. I'm a little worried about what that's going to look like, because again, as we saw last year, once the corners start to make mistakes, that impacts the safeties behind them. And again, I'm not saying that Adams and May are immune to those kind of things. So it's going to be interesting to see if eventually you start to see just Burris and Darryl Roberts, or do you see Burris and Marcus Williams? Burris is another one that, again, he's shown flashes here and there, but there's been times that he's been beat like a Cherokee drum. And so I worry about him long term. But yeah, I'm concerned about the secondary from the corners perspective, because I don't know what you're going to get with Morris Claiborne.
I agree.
Yeah, that's fair. And even if you do expect good play from Morris Claiborne, let's just be real about it. He's probably going to last 4 games at best before he's on injured reserve or something, because that's just been his career history. He's played relatively well the last few games that he's played, but he's just constantly getting hurt. He's supposed to be the one best corner or experienced corner on this team that you could expect to cover number 1 wide receivers, but I don't know. I don't see it, and I certainly don't see him staying healthy to do it either. I talked about this before, but with guys like Burris and Darryl Roberts, ultimately this just comes down to show me what you got this year so I know whether or not you need to be replaced in 2018 when we have a ton of cap space and presumably a lot of draft picks. So that's really what it comes down to with those guys. And I'm with you, Dalvin. I said before, if you can get anything for Buster Skrine at any point, sell, get him out of here. I mean, he really serves no purpose, and Kyle, you hit it on the head. He's at best probably the 5th best cornerback at this point. I might be more inclined to let you take some snaps at cornerback rather than watch Buster Skrine this year. And
my hips are loose, for the record, so I can turn.
Much like Shakira, Kyle's lips don't lie, right?
Hips don't lie, yes.
Hips, I'm sorry. That's what I meant.
Hips don't lie either. Yeah.
It was a Freudian slip. I was trying to say you're a truthful gentleman, Kyle.
Oh. I think.
But no, that's basically what it comes. That's basically what it comes down to for me with the secondary. You've got one guy that gets hurt all the time, one guy that really can't do the job in Skrine, and a whole bunch of guys that are young and have to try and prove that they belong on this roster beyond this year. That's really all there is to it. I mean, that kind of seems like I'm describing almost every unit on this squad except for defensive line. But that's what it is. Like I said, their slogan might as well be the 2017 New York Jets, wait till next year.
Yeah. I mean, it could all change within a matter of, these couple months. Obviously, we have to go through the whole process again. But, we'll talk about special teams in a minute. But you think about the money we have next year, the draft position, we're going to have first-round pick, probably top 10, probably top 5, 2 second-round picks. I mean, right there, you could honestly change your franchise with those 3 picks. If you get 3 more high-quality players, like I'm not saying we're going to get a Leonard Williams in the second round, but if you get a guy maybe like, Marcus May, like we're hoping how he turns out, you can get another one of those guys. You could really change your franchise. Hopefully we use one of those on a quarterback, and then we go out and get Le'Veon Bell and Allen Robinson and maybe a corner, and then we're in the Super Bowl. Let me dream. Don't build a billboard. It's fine. All right, let's talk about special teams. this is what confuses me about special teams, and Scott, we'll start with you on this one once I'm done with my Jet take. We traded for Hennessy. We talked about this in part 1, but I just want to reiterate. We traded for Hennessy primarily because, at least in our opinions, we are only basement bloggers, so don't take everything we say for 100% granted. Remember that. We traded for Hennessy. We traded away our third best safety for a guy who has a close relationship with our suspected kicker, Ross Morton, who was going to be our guy. Great. They have the connection, chemistry. It's good. Easy transition. Great. All right. I'll let go of our third best safety for that. But no, you cut the guy you cut Ross Morton, and you have Chandler Canzero. So not only does Hennessy have to come in, learn a new system, learn a new way, he doesn't even have chemistry with the guy who he's, snapping it to. And it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand why we traded for Hennessy. Tanner Purdom has been great for the past 7 years, going on his 8th. And, we kept Canzero. I mean, he's an okay kicker. He was cut for a reason. And, Lachlan Edwards looks better. But any thoughts on the special teams besides that?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I'll basically, yeah. There's not really much more to add. The only thing I'll say is I'm kind of convinced that if it wasn't for Ross Martin, then the reason that Maccagnan traded for Hennessy is because he needed a player on this team named after a beer, because he's going to have to drink a lot watching this team play in 2017 just to keep his own sanity. So that's got to be what he was thinking.
Hennessy's not a beer. That's a rookie move.
Oh, sorry, man. I don't drink, so, I meant some form of alcohol, but
Wait, you don't drink. How are you a Jets fan?
Yeah, well, that's my father's fault. And you know what? As I've been telling people, I may actually have to start drinking this year if I'm going to be watching these games.
Yeah, do it.
Dalvin and I are going to have to meet up at a pub somewhere in the DMV area and just get so wrecked that when people come up to us and go, how could you wear a Jets hat in public, we just kind of laugh it off and walk out or something without just complete public shame and embarrassment. But, yeah, no, I mean, that's really – it's bizarre what they're doing with all of this stuff. A lot of head-scratching moves, and I think that I was listening to, I believe it was Chris Moore on WFAN when I was doing my 6-hour drive yesterday for a few minutes, and he said it best. He's like, look, the Jets are telling you that they do not want to win this year. It's not really like a newsflash. Like, they do not want to win this year, so when they make a head-scratching move, just chalk it up to, well, whatever. They don't want this team to be good. So it almost is, again, to bring it back to Major League, this almost is like the Rachel Phelps thing, where it's like, I don't want it to be bad. We've been bad. I want this team to finish dead last. And so that's really the only explanation for the moves that you just talked about, Kyle, because at first, like you said, we're like, oh, Ross Martin, and then they cut him, so it's like, all right, well, they traded for a long snapper, or all right, and you traded a guy that finally looked like he was coming around at the cornerback position for a safety who predominantly played special teams and wasn't really very good at safety at all anyway. Okay. It just seems like, all right, let's just play this. I feel like Mike Maccagnan, if he had his druthers, would just snap his fingers and it would be April 2018. And that's kind of how we have to approach this season. That's really, if the Jets are looking at it that way, then we really should too, right?
That's how I'm looking at it. Regardless if I'm a quote-unquote fake fan or not. I mean, that's the reality.
Damn straight. Straight.
All right, boys, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Oh, actually, nope, Scott has a rant. Forgot about that. Scott, you want to call out the worst? The worst.
Yeah, I will.
Backboard, Scott, like Chris Paul to Blake Griffin. Do it. Finish it.
I'm going to try and close this thing the way that Aroldis Chapman should have closed Game 7 of the World Series.
Oh.
Unfortunately, he stumbled a little bit. Hopefully I don't. But this is not my first time that I've had a problem with Manish Mehta. I mean, I've had a problem with him a million times. But we've had run-ins on Twitter because, look, I think that most of the guys that cover this team, and girls when Kimberly Martin was here, did a very good job covering the team. Your boy Darryl Slater, Kyle, I think he does a good job, along with Connor Hughes over at New Jersey Advanced Media. Dennis Waszak, who I like a lot, he does a good job at the Associated Press, and on down the line. Rich Cimini, who some people don't like because he can get a little snarky. I think he's really good at what he does, and he's very interactive with fans. I think that the guys that are the beat reporters generally do a very good job, but Manish Mehta is the exception. And the problem with him is, first of all, he seems to change his tune every 5 seconds. It's absolutely ridiculous. It would make a politician blush. No offense, Dalvin.
Yeah.
But the other problem with him is that it's the way he writes is so sensationalistic and agenda-driven that it's just nauseating. And this Sheldon Richardson thing, which I went at him on Twitter and he responded, and then I buried him with 8 tweets that he didn't bother responding to. He's saying that the Jets will live to regret trading Sheldon Richardson, and they plan poorly because they never should have paid Mo and they should have paid Snacks and this and that. And look, hindsight is 20/20, sure. Ultimately, they probably shouldn't have paid any of the 3 and just saved the money for Leonard Williams, right? Because I like Snacks, but how much money are you going to give to a guy that doesn't get at the quarterback at all? And Sheldon Richardson, you're not going to pay because A, he struggled, and B, quite frankly, he's a pain in the butt. You know, we talked about all the problems he's caused in the locker room and the stuff he's done off the field. So you're not going to pay Sheldon. And for him to say that the Jets should – Rob Carpenter actually went at Manish, and he was doing the Lord's work a couple of days ago, basically saying, look, Manish, they got a second-round pick and a productive – I mean, not a great, but a reasonably productive wide receiver with a Super Bowl pedigree for a guy that they were going to let walk. That's a great trade for the Jets, and Manish is acting like a clown saying otherwise. But the fact is, he's got an agenda here, and the reason that he talks all this stuff about, oh, I love Sheldon, the Jets should have kept him, he's this, he's that. Look, Sheldon's nice to Manish, and Mo isn't, so he yeah, exactly, and he buries Mo. And look, we saw this before. He did this to Geno Smith, and it was disgusting. That column that he wrote where he said that Geno should go play in the CFL, but that was nothing compared to, and Kyle, I don't know if you remember this, but Dalvin, I know you do, that disgusting smear campaign he went on with Doug Marrone. And look, I'm not saying I even wanted Doug Marrone to be the coach, but it was just he had clearly had a vendetta against Doug Marrone. So. Yeah, it was disgusting, dude. All he did was write negative stuff. He couldn't. You mean to tell me that there wasn't one person that he's ever worked with that you could find to say something? I mean, Bill Parcells actually has said nice things about Doug Marrone. You wouldn't know it from reading Manish Mehta. But the other thing about Manish is the stuff that he writes is such tabloid garbage. Like that article he wrote over the summer about Mo looking fat because some anonymous source that was in Rutgers texted him, LOL, Mo looks fat. And Brian Costello called him out on this and said, hey, here's a picture from Instagram a week ago. Looks okay to me. And it was just nonsense. And it makes you wonder, you know, the whole fake news thing or whatever, it gets overused. But does this source even really exist, or is Manish making this up? Because, look, remember that stupid Mitch Trubisky thing that he wrote in December? Where he's like, oh, you know, Mitch Trubisky, the Jets love Mitch Trubisky because some rival scout said that the Jets love him. And it's like, what is McCagnon fax notes to rival scouts? I mean, the season hadn't even ended yet. And to me, he creates stories out of thin air. And look, I have my problems with Keith Olbermann. A lot of people do. He's got a few screws loose, and this is not political. He's clearly kind of insane no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. But he effectively called Manish out for this a couple of years ago on ESPN for basically being full of crap and for, you know, coming up with stories out of nothing. So it really annoys me that this guy has the platform that he does and does such shoddy work. And I have nothing personal against him, but he does such a garbage job. And I'm tired of this. And this, to me, was just another example of him having his agenda of players he likes and players he doesn't, because one guy's nice to him and one guy isn't, and furthering that, and then on top of it, you know, this tabloid garbage. And I really wish that, and Joe Blewett and I have really kind of bonded over this whole thing on Twitter, I wish that people would just stop following him, stop reading him, stop even reacting to the stuff he says, because his stories are garbage. I don't even believe he has real sources. I'll say that right now. And the stuff that he does write mostly is dictated by who is nice to him in the locker room and who isn't. And quite frankly, any Jet fan that takes anything he says seriously at all ever, I don't care what he writes, whether it's positive or negative, is doing themselves a disservice and really doing the fan base in general a disservice. I'm not going to say that I'm going to like boycott or that the Daily News should fire him or whatever. But what I will say is I'm just going to. I'm not going to go get anybody to invest in a billboard or anything. But what I will say is I am going to ignore him. I wish other people would, and then let the chips fall where they may. I'm not one who calls for boycotts or for people to get fired, but he's terrible at his job, and I wish people just wouldn't read him or pay attention to him.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was blocked by Manish Mehta to like a couple weeks ago when he just unblocked everybody. I told him straight up that he was terrible at his job and he doesn't deserve to have a job in this field because he's just so fake. He's so biased. I can't even say what I want to say. But
Hey, Dalvin, I just spoke to a guy on the street at 7-Eleven who was coming out with a cup of coffee, and he told me that 10 years ago you might have – I mean, this is what Manish does.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a bad game of telephone. Like something's going to get misconstrued along the way.
The worst game of telephone ever. The worst game of telephone ever, yes.
Yeah. He's a piece of work, that guy. All right, boys, great talk, great episode, special edition of, let's see if I can get this right, play like the draft.
Turn on the draft. Turn on the draft and play like a Jet take.
I think that's where we're going to end it, guys. Great talk. Okay, go follow, obviously, Joe Caparoso on Twitter, Jets King, turnonthejets.com. We all write for them. You know, we all create content for, King Joe. DA, right-hand man. You can follow him, at, DA Osorio. I'm sure you can just search DA. He'll be the first guy that pops up if you're in the Jets community.
Probably.
One of the hosts of Draft Season podcast, co-host of Turn on the Jets podcast with Joe Caparoso, and obviously my man Scott right here. He is the one that hates Manish Mehta, or however you say his name. He is the host of Play Like the Jets podcast. You have Eric McMillan on this month, correct?
Yes, sir. All month. We're going to do it in 5 parts. We're going to talk 1988, and I promise you there are some stories coming up. There's one in particular, and I'll get into this more perhaps with you and Ben on the Jet Take a little bit, and Dalvin and Joe, I'll call in to tack on at the very end of the Turn on the Jets podcast to preview this. But he's got a story about a Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, that, trust me, you need to hear. I heard him tell it, and I still can't even believe it. It's an unbelievable story. So look forward to that over the next month. I talked to Eric, and I said, hey, Eric, September, it's Eric McMillan Appreciation Month. And he said, it's about time somebody did it.
Nice.
Love it. All right, boys, great episode. And before we end, got to give some shameless shout-outs to myself and, Ben W. Blessington. Ben's out there enjoying a game in Seattle, so he couldn't be, he's watching the Mariners. I don't know why you would go and do that, but so that's why he couldn't be with us today. But you can follow us at The Jet Take on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, just search The Jet Take, and you can obviously find the show, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, and any other good stuff that you want to listen to your pods on, any other podcatcher you could think of. We're probably there. Still working on Spotify, though, so sorry about that. You can follow me personally at Kyle Fahey NFL. If you want to get some hot takes, call me a fake fan. I'm here for it. I'm a Price Betty truther. I will be to the day I die. Probably put it on my headstone. You can follow Ben at Ben W. Blessington on Twitter. His Instagram's private because he has a lot of ex-girlfriends on there that he doesn't want you to know about. Probably shouldn't have said that. But as usual, you can follow, Joe Caparoso, Turn on the Jets, D.A. Osorio, and Scott. Thank you guys for being with me today. And any last comments before we go, boys?
Let's get ready to kick this thing off, right? Next week is the first weekend, and so this is the last Sunday that we will not have football through obviously the next few months. So let's enjoy it.
Yeah, Jets football ends in January.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Jets football begins in, I guess, April, really, is what.
Yeah.
But I guess in closing, boys, always a pleasure. And I believe Dalvin will back me up on this. Kyle, go watch Major League and make sure you read up on the one and only Luke Perry.
You
have? All right. Well, then Well, then go read up on Luke Perry. You shall not disrespect Dylan McKay in Dalvin's presence and my presence ever again.
Any relation to Matthew Perry?
Oh, God. Dalvin, we have so much work to do.
Hey, I get the Seinfeld references, and I feel like that should be enough. All right, I think that's where we're going to end it today, boys. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.